Have you ever wondered which Squid Game is the deadliest? Because I sure have. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video. I'll rank all the games played in Squid Game based on how hard it was to survive them, considering all the facts, not just how many people were killed and the death percentage of each game. Quick note, I won't include the special games because in my opinion, survival there is just based on luck, and I wouldn't call that Battle Royale an actual game. So let's get started with the easiest game to survive, which is Red Light, Green Light from Season 2. Gi-hun did a pretty good job keeping people safe here, and his little maniacal episode at the beginning paid off. Even though people called him crazy at first, they still listened to him, and because of that, a lot of them survived. In this game, only 91 people were killed, which means this game had a 19.96% death rate. If you don't think Gi-hun's actions were helpful at all, let me tell you that in the first game of Red Light, Green Light, the total number of deaths was 255 players. A difference of 164 players is pretty significant, which I think started to worry the frontman for a bit. For the second easiest game, we have the first version of Red Light, Green Light. Even though a lot of players died during this game, it had a 44.08% death rate. I would rate this game second because many people died from the shock and the realization that they were actually in a life or death game. And that panic made them irrational. They started moving when they were specifically told not to. After the initial shock and after witnessing that if you follow the rules, you're allowed to live, this game became easier. The time given was enough to cover all the distance without rushing, so there was no need to take any particular risks to complete this game. I believe the next easiest game would be the six-legged pentathlon. I was kind of unsure where to place this game, because at first glance, it seems like a pure gamble as well. The difficulty is that even if 4 people are good at the game they selected, if the 5th person sucks or panics, they would all be dead. We saw this with the shaman lady. If it weren't for player 120 slapping some sense into her, they would never have completed the time trial. This is why I say this game is pure luck. I initially wanted to place it higher, maybe even in the top 3, but the relatively low death rate percentage made me think more about where this game actually belongs. In this game, 110 players died, meaning 22 teams failed to complete the race, while 52 teams survived. So maybe it wasn't as difficult as I first thought. I think the low death rate is due to the fact that after learning what games are played, you can decide which player would play which game. Allowing you to select the most optimal player formation, the death rate for this game was 30.14%. Continuing our list, I think the next easiest game in the show was Dalgona, and the simplest shapes were the triangle and the star due to their sharp lines. Even the circle wasn't too difficult, as we saw Ali pull it off despite missing 2 fingers. Another big help, if you didn't rush at the beginning of the challenge, was Gi-hun and his strategy, as we saw many people copying him and successfully passing the challenge. So if you hadn't rushed and had taken your time to carefully carve out your shape, your chances of surviving were pretty high. In this game, only 80 players died, which makes its death rate 42.78%. For the 5th game, I would select the Squid Game. The last game of this show wasn't really that deadly, especially in the circumstances from the first season. It was a one-on-one face-off, so all you had to do was outmaneuver the player you were competing against. You didn't even need to kill, as shown in the series. That last fight was added just for spectacle. The best strategy would be to get to the goal as quickly as possible and win the prize money. The difference between Squid Game and Marbles, which I would pick for number 6, is that in Marbles, you would be dealing with a lot of mental stress. When you learn that you need to compete against your partner, it would just break you. Most of the players would team up with the closest friend they have there, so making them compete against each other in Squid Game was one of the most evil and darkest twists I've seen in a series. I mean, that poor husband and wife couple. It's no wonder the husband killed himself after the game. Both games have a 50% death rate, but because of the mental stress and heartbreak, marbles is harder than Squid Game. Now let's get started with the most difficult ones. Here we're going to discuss them in more detail. The next game, in terms of difficulty, would be the Mingle game. In this game, 155 people died, which means it had a 60.78% death rate. While in theory, it might seem like an easy game, in reality, we saw it was pure chaos. Everyone was confused, running in different directions. The announcement of the team numbers was random, and the time until the round ended was too short. You needed to make all those decisions as fast as possible. Who would you choose? Who would you betray? To which door should you all run? There was too much information you had to assimilate in such a short period of time, and that's what made it so challenging. Also, they played a few rounds, so the difficulty grew exponentially. I believe the most difficult team number was 4, because the players had just finished the 6-legged race, where they formed teams of 5. So, with the number being 4, a lot of people wasted valuable time deciding who should leave their team. Moving on to the second most difficult game, we have Tug of War. I think many of you might find this choice strange and wonder why Tug of War deserves such a high ranking, but hear me out. First of all, this game clearly put women at a disadvantage, talking about gender equality in a show and proving that Squid Game doesn't really give a damn about society norm. Secondly, you're required to form a group of 10 players, similar to the 6-legged race. But the difference is that in the Pentathlon, you could choose which player would play each game, allowing you to create the most optimal formation to clear that game. Meanwhile, in Tug of War, the game is already imposed, and you needed strength, overwhelming strength. While a good strategy might help, as we saw in Gi-hun's case, they had the best strategy thanks to Il-nam and Song-woo's quick thinking, but they were on the edge of losing. So, yes, if you were unlucky and ended up with more women on your team, or weak men, you were dead. Even if you had 6 strong players, you couldn't compensate for the other 4. This is why I placed this game so high up, because you needed a ton of luck to find the right teammates, and also needed luck when being paired. In the first season, Deoksu's team was unbeatable, but he cheated in this game, knowing beforehand that he needed to build a strong team with only men. For this game, there were 40 deaths, resulting in a perfect 50% death rate. And for the hardest and most brutal game from Squid Game, we have the Glass Bridge game. I think this is a no-brainer for why it's ranked first, and I'm sure all of you will agree with my choice. This game is pure luck. All the fairness of the games disappears during this one, from the fact that player 1 had no chance of surviving, to the moment they turned off the lights when they realized the glassmaker could differentiate the tiles. The whole season lectures us about the fairness of the games, how all players are equal, and that they're giving a last chance for redemption, only for them to shatter this entire concept because the VIPs thought it wasn't fun. For real? Other players benefit from personal traits or experiences, so his experience absolutely should have been allowed if he survived that long. Imagine if Il-nam wasn't allowed to disclose his strategy during Tug of War. His team would have definitely lost, and all of them would have been killed on the spot. But no, when a VIP is involved, suddenly the game rules change. Glass Bridge was the only game where the rules were changed on the spot, and even if you went last, the game still wasn't cleared. That was the most luck-based game I've ever seen. If you went among the first, you were screwed. Even the end wasn't safe, as we saw in the actual show. What if the players in front of you freeze and you run out of time? I swear, if this game weren't on a TV show, they would all have died right there. If I were to go first, I would refuse to jump. I'd stay at the edge of the platform, too scared to jump. I mean, I'd die for sure, but at least that way, I'd get killed instantly, not by falling through glass, with the possibility of surviving the crash and dying from bleeding out. Definitely, the Glass Bridge was the most brutal and deadliest game in Squid Game. This game started with 16 players, and only 2.5 survived, if we're being honest. Sae-byeok got the most unfair treatment ever. Why blow up the tiles at the end when the game was completed within the time limit? It's a mystery to me, and one of the biggest mistakes of the show. But this was the only way for Squid Game to have a finale. where the protagonist faces the antagonist in a one-on-one death game. So yeah, that's all for today's video. Do you agree with my list? If not, let me know your ranking in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.